And I've just hit record as well before we begin, so that we know that it's definitely happening. But we'll give it just a moment or two, because I know that people are still sort of coming into the room and getting settled. And then I'll introduce you, Chloe, and then we'll begin.
And has that brought up just the screen? You can just see one of my slides.
I can see your first slide yet with younger mums and a picture on it. So I can see what you can see, but it looks good. Looks good here.
Don't want to be sharing the notes that are very poorly written in the side, so just to make sure.
So look, welcome back everybody. I hope you got a tea or coffee break. I had a cup of tea, and we're delighted you've tuned back in again. We're going to be hearing from Chloe McVeigh in just a moment, but just as we are gathering, just a wee reminder of what we've got coming up. So our next few speakers we have our community involved sector panel, which we're looking forward to. We have Darren Beggs, who'll be speaking about dads, and then we also have our keynote speaker for the day, Lynette Fay, and that is all before we have our lunch break. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for all or most of those. And again, as you will have heard, if you were listening, we are recording these talks, so they will be made available, and Michelle will email out with how you can rewatch, or if you haven't been able to see them all, how you can see for the first time all of the talks that we are having on today. But I'm absolutely delighted that we have Chloe McVeigh joining us today. Chloe is a member of staff at the Parent Rooms. She is our Younger Mums Key Worker, which is a relatively new role, and Chloe's been doing an absolutely fantastic job and is going to be sharing with us more about that and why that support is so much needed and is so important. So Chloe, I am going to hand over to you, and once again everybody, if you have any questions or thoughts throughout Chloe's presentation, fire into the chat and I'll come back on at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to have some questions from the floor. So thank you very much, Chloe, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for attending. I am absolutely delighted to be here. I have been the Younger Mums Key Worker for the Parent Rooms just from February. So like Lindsay says, it's quite a new role, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm loving the work that the Parent Rooms does, across the board, and how important it is. But today I've been asked to, give a bit of insight into why for younger mums the intensive support is so important, and why within the Parent Rooms we decided to make the first key worker a Younger Mums Key Worker. So I started in February, and like I said, delighted to be here. And as part of being a member of staff at the Parent Rooms, any younger mum that comes through to ourselves and is looking for support enters into our new 3-phase framework of support. I know Michelle has spoken about this earlier. So there's the point of entry, and the younger mums that come to us come through via the same pathways. You can self-refer into ourselves, or you can, if you're a health professional, you can refer a young mum into our services. So they come in the same way and engage in the same 3 phases of engage, evolve, and empower. But there is always a different lens for the younger mums. We work with ages 16 to 25, and the reason that we provide intensive support and made that a priority is that younger mums have different sets of pressures on them as a general rule. And obviously that won't be the case for all young mums, but it's something that we need to be really aware of, and that any healthcare professionals or anyone that's supporting or working with younger mums need to be aware of, because the set of pressures that parents generally are under, which is so huge anyway, tends to be amplified. And also younger parents have huge, additional pressures on them. So I just want to talk a little bit about why we felt it was so important to give younger mums intensive support as part of our framework. So we were talking about reasons behind offering younger mums support. You need to look at the risk factors and the additional pressures that younger mums often face. And I've just gone through them one by one. And the biggest one recently has been issues of isolation, which has always been an issue for younger parents anyway, because of multiple adjustments to identity and lifestyle. So you go from being a young person, from exiting out of childhood, or whether or not you have done by the time you become a parent, and all your what your expectations of what your life was going to be changes very rapidly, and you have to reconceive of what it is you're going to do with your life, with the additional caring responsibilities and who it is you are in the context of being a parent and being a younger parent. And this is very isolating. We have a quote from a mum of two here that says, "After I had my baby, my friends stopped coming around anymore. They have different things that are important to them, and they don't really understand that I can't just come and go as I please anymore." So there's a real separation of the younger parent, younger mum, from her, her past life before she became a parent. And that's a hugely isolating thing to happen, where your friends drift away. And also, obviously, in the context of the pandemic, that's a very, it's been made more extreme and felt even more deeply by younger parents who don't necessarily have the support structures and social structures in place that other parents might have, who have friends of a similar age that are having children at a similar age to them. And the impact of the isolation is huge. It has a very negative impact, obviously, on the parents' mental health, on the young mum's mental health. And then obviously then that has an impact on the child's mental health. And there has been a report by, I think it was NICFA. Oh no, it was the Centre for Mental Health, and it was in 2021. And it discovered that 94% of younger parents were reporting that their children were crying, having tantrums, and being more clingy than usual. That's 94%. And it was double the rate than that reported by older parents, which is just a huge statistic. So the impact of the pandemic has just been absolutely profound for everybody, but particularly for this demographic. Another risk factor whenever you are working with a younger parent, and an additional pressure that's on younger parents, is that a significant number of younger mums rely solely on welfare and live in relative or absolute poverty, and that's in the UK. And this includes a lack of access to secure and safe housing, and lack of access to nutritional food. So a lack of adequate social housing produces a reliance on insecure temporary housing or living with relatives. So in addition to having the stress of being a parent, you have the added layers of having to rely on welfare, which has become more and more, the process of which of trying to access it has become more and more convoluted because of the welfare changes that have happened within the last number of years, and the changes and the switching over to universal credit, and the impact that has on their lives and their access to to be able to provide a high nurturing level of care for their child. Again, the same study showed that parents on the lowest incomes have reported a negative impact on their child's behaviour at a rate twice as high as parents on the highest income. So again, that's the same, looks like the same sort of statistic, as it's twice as high as parents who are older. That's also twice as high if you come from a household that is living in relative or absolute poverty. The parents that we are working with at the moment that have engaged with our services because of where we are. So the Younger Mums Project really, it can be, I can support somebody remotely, but it's because it's all about reducing that isolation for the parent. A lot of the younger mums that would come through to ourselves want to engage with the programme face to face. And because of where we're placed, we're in North Belfast. The younger mums that we're actually engaged with are, they're coming from areas where the multiple deprivation measurements which indicates what sort of level of deprivation the areas are experiencing, range between about 7 and 49. And when you think about it in the context of the measurements being up to 890, being right at the top of that scale is huge. So we really are working with younger mums that are facing huge amounts of financial pressures and barriers. And obviously that has an impact on the child as well. But that tends to be irrespective of where the younger parent comes from, because they've had a lack of access to education and access to training. The reliance on welfare and what that means is absolutely huge for this group. So that brings me to another risk factor, which is lower attainment. So whenever a young mum has a child at a young age, it hugely reduces the likelihood of educational or employment attainment, as pathways into the labour market are halted or blocked by caring responsibilities. So for those who have a child during school age, when they're still at school themselves, the possibility of getting a sufficient education for future employment falls hugely. And for those who have completed education, their pathway into employment is blocked by the caring responsibilities. And very significantly, and very much in the UK, the lack of flexible working models within the labour market, which is a huge issue for single parents, where there isn't an awareness within the labour market that a flexible working model it would reduce the barriers to employment, and it basically excludes any single parents from entering the labour market. So it's absolutely huge. Have a quote from a mum mum of one, age 23, who talked to us about how I was in training when I became pregnant, and it was like I stopped mattering. They clearly saw me as a burden and not worth investing time in. So this was a young mum's experience, or a pregnant woman's experience of whenever she told her training provider that she was going to have a baby, she fell off their priority list and stopped mattering. And the feeling of that sense for any younger parents that are in education, that they don't matter anymore in terms of their education provider, is very, very deeply entrenched with any of the young mums that we've come in contact with, and also who I've come in contact with in a previous role where I've worked with younger mums for 6 years. And it's that they have a really clear impression that if you're not going to be of any use to the educational bodies, how they score in terms of outcomes, then you're not worth investing time and money in. And it's really something that they feel very profoundly. So another risk factor, which is an additional pressure for younger mums, one that they often face, is relationship tensions. A really significant majority of younger mums are single parents, and there tends to be a high involvement of services such as women's aid and issues of domestic abuse, and also issues surrounding paternal access, parenting contact, and financial contribution. It's huge within this demographic, but something that we've also noticed over the last while, which has become really evident, particularly with the changes to welfare, and particularly with the huge lack of housing, social housing particularly, within the UK, but I think very much significantly within Northern Ireland, is that the younger mums are not only facing issues of, they may have a history of issues with the father. Additionally, the lack of social housing means that they're reliant on relatives for housing, and this has led to a significant rise in intergenerational conflict. And it's something that I've discussed with other charity and voluntary sector organisations. It's something that they've also noticed themselves. So it's become a real issue that younger mums are not able to stand on their own 2 feet because the provision just isn't there. The housing provision isn't there. So they're having to stay within their childhood home. And obviously, in some cases, it's absolutely fine, but there have been numerous instances where intergenerational conflict has been brought to our attention, and intergenerational abuse, where the emotional abuse that is happening to the mum, and then obviously that impact on the child is really significant. There's a quote from a mum that we worked with, and she said, "I feel like I'm not really my baby's mummy. She," and she meant her mother, "makes me feel like everything I do is wrong." So there's that. The parent isn't being allowed to step into her role as a mother and have autonomy over, the baby's, how she parents her child, and she's made to feel very much still like a child within the household. So the final risk factor that I wanted to highlight, and it's something that comes up again and again whenever you speak to younger parents and younger mothers, is that they feel completely stigmatized by our society, and it's something that doesn't seem to be going away. Whenever we surveyed younger mums at the beginning of the year, when I first started in this role, and also previously, the issue that kept coming up was about the issue of stigma, and it was the number one issue raised by younger parents, and 100% of them surveyed asked for a stigma-free session. So they wanted, whenever they were asked, what can we provide you, what would help you with your mental health, they identified a stigma-free session. So coming somewhere where they don't feel judged, they don't feel like they would tell their story or explain their circumstances and be judged, because in so many other contexts they do feel judged and they feel like society is looking down on them. So one of the stigmas is societal, and there's a quote from a mum of 3 who's age 21. "In society, I think that young mums are viewed really badly. I think they have got this stigma that if you're a young mum, you're a bad mum, or if you had a baby for benefits and a house and stuff like that." So there's that. She's talking about that attitude that you have a baby to access social benefits, but as I was talking about previously, those aren't even in place. It's not even a case that happens automatically for a young parent, and they end up in hostels and living with relatives. But there's still that enduring stigmatization. There is a lot of talk about young parents, but in my eyes, young parents are not bad. We are just parents. So this is a young parent who feels like she shouldn't be stigmatized in that way, and she shouldn't be viewed in that way. And she wants to just be seen as a parent as opposed to a younger parent. And it's something that has come up again and again whenever I've been working with younger parents, is how they feel judged by so many people that they come in contact with, and there is very little acknowledgement of how, as a mum, they are left with the pregnancy and they are left to deal with the pregnancy, because in a huge majority of cases they are single parents, so they're having to step up to become full-time carers, and despite not generally, as a rule, planning for the pregnancy, and they're the ones that change their whole lives to look after the baby. And despite that, that's never acknowledged, and it's something that they have brought up to me again and again. So that's sort of how they've felt about society and how society judges them. And they also, I've had younger parents talk to me about complete strangers in the middle of the street stopping them to ask things like, or is the same father for both your children? Completely inappropriate, not anyone's business, but because they're younger parents, that person has implied that they're somehow lesser, and because they're younger parents, they can be asked whatever the person feels that they need to ask them, and there's just multiple stories that go along those lines. So that's just generally in society. More worryingly is the reports that we have had from younger parents about stigma within professional context. So the majority of younger mums that we surveyed reported that they had at some stage experienced negative interaction with professional healthcare staff. Staff were not properly trained in how to deal with me. There was definitely an attitude like, just do as we're telling you. I was a young mum, but because I wasn't in a Sure Start area, I didn't fit the criteria for a lot of help. I had to push the midwife to try and find me help. So that's an example of a a typical attitude that younger parents are telling us that they have experienced at some point with professional healthcare staff, that as a young parent, they're not allowed the autonomy over how they parent their child. And also there's a lot of reports that, this is an example of somebody that actually did ask for help, but the majority of the parents that we surveyed stated that they weren't comfortable asking for help because they already felt judged and they didn't want anyone to think that they weren't up to the task. So their likelihood to seek help is just hugely reduced. And then obviously that has a negative impact and increases the likelihood of issues of mental health and not coping. So that's another risk factor. So that reduces the likelihood of the younger parent to help seek. Any surveys that we've done, and also there's a lot of research by other organisations that has indicated how profoundly negative younger mums, their negative perception of services, and Young Mums Together, which was a project by the Mental Health Foundation, stated that services may often feel inaccessible or stigmatizing to young mums who, with a disproportionately high focus on mental health symptoms. Mothers may also feel that services do not attend to social support needs or not specifically supporting the mother's developing relationship with her baby. So because as a young parent, they don't feel that their needs are addressed, and therefore they won't ask. So we asked younger parents, what they would like to in addition to the stigma free, and that was sort of the general overwhelming overview of what they would like to receive in terms of support. And these are just a couple of examples of the sort of responses that we received. One parent said, I would like to see a peer support group with parents who not only experience mental health issues, but also for those who have experience with social services. There's such a stigma surrounding both of these things, and it's very hard to find people who have went through similar things to what I've went through. So that's the additional stigma of having, experience with social services. And unfortunately for that demographic, there is a higher rate of contact and involvement of social services. Another mum, age 18, mum of one, says services that make parents make lasting friendships, and that babies will make friends too. So real emphasis on needing that social connection because their previous life has fallen away. A chance to learn about how my baby is developing, but without feeling judged for not already knowing. So wanting that expertise and wanting to learn, but not wanting to do it in a traditional context because that's where they've had negative feedback and negative interactions. So for all of these reasons, we offered intensive services for younger mums, and this is sort of how it looks once you come in. So you come in to the parent rooms, and you enter here and you go through the same processes as the other parents that come to use our services. But additionally, because of the additional risks and additional needs, we have put this in place as well. So we operate on a person-centered approach, and we meet the mums where they are and adjust support accordingly. The younger mums the research that was done as part of that project over in London, I think it was, very much highlighted that there is no point in prescribing to younger parents what it is that they need. You have to let them tell you what they need, and there's no point in having things absolute and fixed, because their lives won't necessarily allow for that, because they don't generally have support. And you do have to be very flexible and patient about what it is that they are ready for. We operate safe and non-judgmental spaces, and that's something we're very, very aware of because of the emphasis on the issue of stigma. And we want to make sure that all younger mums know that Parent Rooms is somewhere where they won't be judged. Another part of the intensive support is a holistic one-to-one advocacy. So whenever a parent comes in as the key worker, I'll sit down and work out a personal wellness plan. And as part of that, we'll take a very holistic approach and look at what the mum might need in terms of advocacy for housing or welfare or anything else, or dealing with social services, or even if they're at a different point in their lives where they are thinking about trying to get into training or employment, and we'll look at how to go about that as well. So very holistic. Project co-design, so we will give the younger mums ownership of the programme and what it is they feel they need. So that's very much for the group support, and it has to be participant led, because otherwise the engagement will not be there and the support won't be there, so that they won't get out of the programme what they need. Very importantly, social and peer connection. So a lot of the young mums, like I highlighted earlier, come to us having no other social support in terms of connections with other young mums, and they feel incredibly isolated. So this programme creates the opportunity to foster social connection between younger mums and for them to share their own experiences and to have shared experience, so they can identify with their peers. And then finally, once they get to the empower stage within our 3-step model of support for the Parent Rooms, we will take a really holistic approach to that and try and help them and give them whatever support they need. I had a couple of other slides as well, because I wanted to talk briefly about some of the barriers and our challenges to supporting younger mums, because everything that we have in place is, it's all there and accessible, but unfortunately at the moment we don't have childcare. And childcare, I believe, is something that's really, really important for younger mums to be able to access on-site childcare provision. More so, I would argue, than older parents, because of the general rule. Again, it's a general rule that they don't have respite, and they are single parents, and they don't have that support to have some time to themselves, and also have the space and the time to learn, the space and the time to connect with their peers and create those networks, and also the space and time to think about their future. So finally, Lindsay, I know that you're lurking there because I'm talking too much. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to how to get in touch and how to refer yourself or someone else to the Younger Mums Project at Parent Rooms. So you can do so via self-referral, which is on our website. So it's that is the link, and you can register for support, and then a professional referral. So if you want to refer someone through to the programme, you can do it via the website as well. Or if you want, there's my email as well at the bottom if you want more information. So thank you very much. Sorry I'd overtalked, Lindsay, and thank you for your time.
Chloe, thank you so much for that presentation. Honestly, such important work that you're doing. Really, really interesting and wonderful to hear actually some of the comments from younger parents themselves, which really helps to set the scene. And we do have some comments here. We are going to go on to the next session in a minute, but I do want to just come to a few of these comments just to give voice to some of these. So Shauna says, "This has been so unbelievably eye-opening and relatable. Thank you so much for this session. If anything, I think I understand my own parents' positions now." So thank you, Shauna, so much for sharing that. Janet has said, "As someone who was a teenage mother and was fortunate stayed in education, and now work as a midwife and doing a master's, I still feel stigmatized, and it's definitely something I'm conscious of when caring for young mums, to make them feel unjudged. Really important, and thank you for sharing that, and also thank you for the important work that you are doing, Janet, as well. And Claire Anderson has said, brilliant service and so important to highlight the experience of young mums. Thank you. Emma O'Neill says, this is an amazing and much needed services for younger parents. Tiny Life are more than happy to support with referrals and signposting. I have really enjoyed this awareness talk. Thanks, Chloe. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you.
This is wonderful info. However, I'm just wondering if you support young mums with learning difficulties or autism or barriers to learning, and if so, do you know what proportion of mums this makes up? Do you want to talk to that very quickly, maybe, Chloe?
At the moment, we don't have the capacity to specifically, support somebody with learning difficulties, but that wouldn't mean that we wouldn't, if they came to us, that I wouldn't absolutely try to facilitate them. But I suppose that's something that whenever we grow and whenever Michelle gets all the funding that she's going to get, that's something that we could definitely think about doing in a more designed more specifically for young mums with learning difficulties. And thank you for flagging that up, because it's something that I have worked with younger parents with learning difficulties previously, but not in a very specific way. So it would be really brilliant to develop something and get something set up which was very much to address that demographic. Fingers crossed in the future we'll have something like that.
And we've just got a message in there just to the chat to say that Now Project will take referrals for that. So that might be something. I know you'd be very keen to talk to anybody else or any other organisations who work in this area, Chloe. So maybe there could be some connection or collaboration between both of those. So thank you for that, Mandy, for putting that into the chat. So once again, Chloe, thank you so much, both for your presentation, but also for the wonderful work that you have been doing, particularly having only joined the Parent Rooms a few months ago. I know that you have made such a significant difference and are very much part of the team here. So thank you for sharing today, and also thank you for the really important work that you are doing.
Thank you, Lindsay, and delighted to be here. So thank you again.
No problem, and thank you to all of you who have been part of this so far. Again, we're going to finish up and end up this Zoom session, and if you use the link to log in, we're going to hear from next our community and voluntary sector organisations working in parenting and mental health support. So do finish up here and do come and join us, and I'll see you again in just a moment.
Thank you.